Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to talk about truth in photography. So I'm Daniel Norton. I'm a photographer here in New York. I've been doing this a long time. I make these videos to kind of talk about technique, talk about philosophy, those kind of things. If you guys are interested, whether you be a photographer or an artist, go ahead and subscribe. So this is kind of an interesting area, I think, and one that I get a lot of conversation about when I talk to people. And now I'm not going to talk about, I'll talk about very briefly, the idea of like photojournalism. I think that most people can agree that if you're a photojournalist and you're out there covering news stories or whatever, then, doing things like, editing in Photoshop and adding things and subtracting things or whatever to kind of make the photo better or to make it have a certain point is probably not within the ethics of a photojournalist. I think that most people agree, and I'm pretty sure that all photojournalists agree that you shouldn't do that. That's not what I'm talking about. I guess what I'm talking about is the idea of like, how much retouching should we do, or create? And now there's kind of this area, I guess, that I'm going to discuss is kind of the midpoint of, let's say, portraiture, maybe fashion, not the over the top computer art. I mean, if you're making somebody, and they're flying through space or whatever, okay, that's whatever. I'm talking about the idea of like photographing somebody and then changing them to suit some kind of a standard that people might believe to be more beautiful or more attractive or whatever. How much of this should we do as photographers is kind of, I think, a debate that a lot of people have. Some people are purists, don't change it at all. Some people are, don't care. They're like, do whatever you want, make it look good. I think too, part of this debate can be taken as, should we fix it? See, that's often the times that where I'll step in. So that's where I'm going to talk, because that's where my point of view is. I believe that we can use our photography to capture what's in front of us, let's say a portrait, right, of somebody, and make them look as good as possible using lighting, using posing, highlighting the things that maybe we want to feature, using shadow or pose or whatever to reduce the things that aren't there, that we don't want to see, I should say. And I think something like a pimple, that comes and goes is something that can be removed. Those things all seem completely legit to me. When somebody shoots an image that is not flattering, let's say the lighting is flat and boring, the pose is, dead on, which is making somebody look, let's say they're heavy set, making them look big, and then they jump into Photoshop and they slim the person up and they use dodge and burn to add, highlight and shadow to create shape. I feel like at a certain point, that becomes less about being a photographer and more about being a digital artist. And if we are calling ourselves or wanting to be photographers, then I think we want to reduce the amount of that we do. Now, if you have an idea and you need to do some manipulation in post in order to fulfill it, and you shoot it in such a way that that's something you're factoring in, that's a different subject. Like if you talk about somebody, like I know that the argument is usually Ansel Adams spent years in the darkroom mixing one print or whatever. If you've ever been in the darkroom, you would, and I think half the people that say these things never have been, you would know that, first of all, you can't do nearly what you do in Photoshop in the darkroom. Clearly, I think that's pretty obvious. But if you actually read the books Ansel Adams wrote about the zone system and all sorts of stuff, is the reason why he did that was exactly the point I made before. He shot his negatives in such a way that he knew he was going to do that in the darkroom. Basically, there's only so much range, that the film can accept, and he would expose in such a way to get all the zones, and maybe I'll do a video on zone system, so that he would have, detail wherever he could, and then that created generally a flat image, usually. And then using the darkroom techniques, you could then bring up the contrast and make it a little bit more interesting, and bring up areas that were dark, blah, blah, blah. That's your dodging and burning that you do in darkroom. When you look at dodging and burning that people do in Photoshop, you see tons of tutorials for this where they're like completely changing the shape of somebody's face and like basically adding light that didn't exist. This is a different kind of dodging and burning, so don't give me the Ansel Adams thing there. What I'm wondering is, to me, this is kind of more philosophical, I guess. Like, when somebody comes up to me and they say, Daniel, how do I make somebody look thinner in photos? Right? And if anybody's watched any of my videos before, I've said this before, I say it at live streams when people say it, I say it all the time. This is my philosophy, this is how I interpret it. Why not make people feel good about the way they look? You know, yeah, you're gonna do the best to make them look, you know, their best, but why Photoshop away what's really there? Everybody, no matter what they look like, has some insecurity. It's your job as the photographer, I think, to help them recognize what's interesting or beautiful about them. And that's it, right? If you can do that, if you can pull this thing out of the person that's interesting, they will be okay with the fact that they don't look, you know, like a super skinny person if they're heavyset, because they don't look like that. And what's even worse is, and I see this a bunch, and people talk to me, models that I photographed or actors or whatever, where a photographer will photograph them, and then they won't even do it for the model. Like, they won't even be like, oh, well, she said that she looked, you know, heavyset, so I mean, they do it for themselves. So they return these pictures to the models, and the model's face has been manipulated. They've been made too skinny or stretched out, or the boobs are bigger, or muscles are bigger if they're a guy. Like, what are you telling that person that you photographed? Like, you're not good enough, so I had to make you different in the computer? Like, I just feel like that's such a weird thing to do to somebody. You know, we should recognize and see beauty in things and then capture it as photographers. Capture it the way we see it, because when you're interacting with somebody, right, you don't notice every little flaw in them. So as a photographer, we kind of do that, right? We try to cover the flaws, if you will, as best we can with lighting or posing or whatever. But to just go in and just shoot flat and boring and then do it all in post and then call yourself a photographer, I would call you a lazy photographer because you didn't do it in the camera. So I guess that's where I'm at there. If you just say, hey man, I just shoot, you know, images for, you know, a basis for me to do my digital art to, that's a whole different thing. And I think that's fine too. Then it's more digital art, less photography. I think that line has become more and more blurred over the years, and I think it will continue to be blurred. But kind of what's spurred this video, by the way, is that I was walking through Times Square. Yeah, it was Times Square, in the subway. And there's all these posters up. So anybody's in New York can look and find these posters. Now, I'm not going to call out what they're for. They're for a TV show. And there are actors in these posters, lots of actors, and they range in age. I would say, didn't Google them, but I would say somewhere in like their 20s all the way up until like their 50s. And not a single one of them has anything under the eyes, has any wrinkles. All their skin is completely flat. And what's funny is when you look at the younger people, you almost expect that because, like, you know that people do that. You know, you see it on Instagram, whatever. But the older people, it just looks weird to me. It's like you're taking this actor, and you're basically saying, you know what, you're not beautiful anymore because you're older, and you know what, we're just going to remove all that and make you look like this younger person. And that, the experience that they've lived through, all that is their beauty, and to remove that from them is just nuts to me. So, as a photographer, I find it the best technique is to look at our subject, see what we like, find that truth. You know, maybe they have beautiful eyes, maybe they're you know, statuesque, maybe they have a great jawline, maybe they have a great smile, and capture those things. Make those the focus of the photo. Then you won't have to hide or change and post the other things that are less perfect. So if you can do that, then you're actually bringing out a truth, right? The truth of the person that's in front of you. And to me, that is one of the powers of photography, one of the things that makes it such a great medium to work in. If you totally disagree, you're probably not watching. No, if you totally disagree, I say that ultimately, you know, let me know. Maybe you guys use tons of Photoshop and you think that's just okay to do. And I know that the excuses are always like, I don't have time to blah. The I don't have time thing kills me. It's like, what, is suddenly nobody has time? Once I had somebody tell me they didn't have time to use a light meter, I'm like, you don't have time to use a light meter? What does that even mean? You're doing a photo shoot, like, take 10 seconds to meter the light. It's like, how hard is that? It's faster to meter the light and do it than it is to just keep shooting till you get into proper exposure. And before anybody puts the comment, or I'm sure you're going to anyways, TTL is metering. It's through the lens metering. So if you have TTL, clearly you don't have to use a light meter in your hand. But if you're just doing this, like, shoot until you get a proper exposure, I have no idea what you're at there. So, anyways, That's a different video, I guess. We'll do a light meter video. We'll get ready for the light meter video coming up. We'll get into light meters. But in any case, guys, let me know what you think about this. Is photography truth? Is it truth anymore? Was it ever truth? You know, some might say choosing what you frame automatically makes it an untruth, and you're making your opinion. But I'd be curious what people think. You know, how do you guys like to operate? You know, do you try to get the best possible thing? Do you leave imperfections in the pictures? Do you get clients that ask you to remove them? And how do you talk to them about that? Do you just do it, or do you say, hey, you know, do you really want to do that? Like, how do you handle that? And also, if this discussion goes in a certain direction, I think it might, maybe I'm going to do a video on retouching, and I'll do like a little bit of retouching in a video to kind of show you guys things that I do that I think don't remove the true character from somebody, but help kind of clean up what the camera can't handle. Because one thing I used to always say, of course now everybody shoots digital for everything, but back in the transitional phase between digital and film, I used to always say, if you have to retouch it, use digital, because you're going to have to retouch digital no matter what. It's never as good as film, in the sense that film hides a lot. You know, if you shoot some nice, beautiful film, a portrait of somebody, and they have like minor blemishes, usually you can't see it, you know, because if you know how to shoot the film properly. With digital, it's almost always a problem. You can't do the same techniques you can, so they're always there, and then you got to take care of that. But when you step into this next level of like changing somebody's facial shape, you know, like literally taking somebody who's beautiful and changing the shape of their face, for God knows why you would do that. Or adding light to their eyes. That's the thing, Seth. It's adding lights to their eyes where it shouldn't be. It's like, nobody's eyes look like that. Like, why? Why do you do that? And why do you think it looks good? You know? Or maybe it does look good. Maybe I'm wrong. So anyways, guys, this is one of those more kind of up in the air things. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of different opinions. Let me know what you think. If you haven't subscribed and ring the bell, please do. And I'll see you next time.